I think
Says we're on the air.
Inventive Harvest is going to show up. Have you
Yeah.
subbed to him? Um, he made some comments that I guess I have issue with straight away. Not, in a friendly, disagreeable way. I'm not happy with this chair. It's all right for. We'll get the other chair right.
I'm gonna check if I am. I think I am subscribed, but
Yeah, he made a video.
it says we're on the air.
So, what do you want to know about AI? I have got thoughts of counterpoints to what appears to be your position. Like last time we was talking, we were both inclined to think of the universe in an informational way, and that it could be broken down into zeros and ones. And that seems, if that's the case, then surely a machine is capable of it. There are no processes. The human mind is, if it can do one digital process through a quantum mechanical way, then we can maybe do it in a slower way with regular computers, and an equally quick way with quantum computers. That's my thought. And
But why would you assume that the processes that a quantum computer does can be performed by a regular, like what we know of as a computer, or I think we should just call a.
Because if everything's down to information, then the brain is processing binary information, and any generic, what's the word, Turing machine will be able to process it. I don't. Can you give an example of a binary process which can't be performed, by a Turing machine?
Yeah, well, quantum mechanical processes can't be. So, for example, with the quantum mechanical process that is going on in photosynthesis, you can take the input photons that hit the leaf as the information input, and you can transfer that information as energy to the location in the leaf where that energy can be used to synthesize a sugar, right? And you could do this with quantum mechanical processes, which are purely mechanical. It's a wave mechanics, though, and that becomes fundamentally different from if you had any classical process trying to transfer that energy. Because of the laws of entropy, you would lose energy every step of the way in a way that it's not true of quantum mechanics. So it's a fundamentally more parallel process.
I'm sure I've uploaded a video where Susskind says, yeah, quantum mechanics can be simulated. Yeah, and what he means is permitting faster than travel speed of light, or I mean that's just a layman's way of expressing. If we are a simulation, for example.
Well, I'm not saying it can't be simulated. It can also be built. We could build an artificially intelligent machine. Arguably, our bodies do that when we create new life forms. But a Turing machine is a limited machine. The Turing machine that all of our programming is based on and how languages work. It's an idealized model of a machine that has a tape. You know the Turing machine definition, or how the Turing defined the Turing machine? I'll just say it. It's a machine. It has a tape. It's a tape reader. And there's a paper tape going, an infinitely long paper tape, and it can move the tape. It can move the tape, and on the tape are symbols. It can read the symbols, and it can write a symbol, and it can move the tape, and that's it. It can move the tape forward, back. It can read a symbol, so it can read a symbol, and that symbol can be taken as an instruction, advance the tape 1, read the symbol in, interpret it as a number, advance it again, and read that symbol in, interpret it as a number, advance it again, add those two numbers together, and write that. You know, you're gonna write, you add that together, advance it, and you write the answer kind of mixed up at the end. You know, at the end, and you could do stuff like this. You could be writing it as data or instructions, because you know when the head falls on a particular symbol, it can take that as an instruction, but the instruction can be, you know, I'm a number. Or the instruction can be, you know, look at the next two symbols and think of them as numbers, which is exactly what's going on in the computer, right? It's all numbers, but sometimes you hit an address and you're executing that number as a command. Sometimes that address, you know, that number is supposed to be data. Okay, that's the whole picture. And from that, you know, they can prove a lot of things. You know, what is more or less complex of a mathematical problem to solve. You know, there's complexity theory and things like the traveling salesman problem, which are, you know, fundamentally difficult to do on a Turing machine. And some of those things that are fundamentally difficult to do on a Turing machine, meaning like reaching the speed of light, yeah, you could simulate it, but it's going to take more and more energy if you get a more and more complicated, you know, simulation. Those things are simple with a quantum computer, so they scale differently. So yeah, you can build entirely different algorithms out of them. So
yeah, but the question's one of the principle. Firstly, I mean, I'm not saying certain tasks aren't easier with a quantum computer or quantum processes, but when I don't know whether we're on the verge of agreeing, but if we agree that all quantum processes have a non-quantum mechanical equivalent. Yeah, however, whatever ingredients, and you might not like the ingredients or whatnot, but in principle, there is a Newtonian logical way of grinding out that.
Okay.
And you can't discount the idea that if this is a simulation, that it's simulating, like quantum mechanics is a hack, if you like, of the system, you know, like a back door where, so there's the brute force way of churning through things, but you know, you can like invoke the quantum subroutine.
But wait, what are we talking about? Are we because I do believe that the Turing machines can simulate people. I believe we'll get, you know, they can answer phones and probably start, you know, acting like humans. You have artificial intelligence of some sort, and the issue really, though, is, I mean, are you saying that is the artificial intelligence ever, are you going to build it to the point where it is a real intelligence, or is it just simulating a part? And so the question is, you know, is it going to have a conscious inside? You know, a lot of the computing people right now, yes, they think that when they get their computer complex enough, somehow that will spark real intelligence and actual consciousness, right?
Right. What the argument I'm picking with you, that's part of the generalized AI kind of argument.
Just saying it won't happen in a computer.
But I'm picking a point with you that there seems to be a conflict of ideas between the idea of accepting the informational digital nature of the states of the universe and the way they're updated, and predicating the possibility of AI based on the need for some quantum magic. If for example, if you're running a quantum brain and I'm working a mechanical brain, and okay, you have to decide, you know, am I conscious? And the only difference seems to be you have to wait 10,000 years for my replies, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
If functionally, you know, what would be the difference between, you know, between that? Would I still be conscious if you had to wait 10,000 years? Yet, if you removed that time delay, you know, you filmed it and edited out the 10,000 year wait, and then let somebody watch it and say, is that a conscious being? You know, they would say, yeah, certainly. And then they find out that every word he spoke was a 10,000-year wait for because he was working. Would that constitute? Is a question, I guess.
Yeah, well, that would be fine with me, but there's a couple issues with that. I mean, one, I'm saying I don't think you can ever, there's certain problems that you will never solve, and it's not 10,000 years, it's trillions of years, longer than the life of the universe, right? So even if in principle you could simulate, it's like, okay, that's like saying I could, in principle, store data about anything in the universe. So given enough time, I could collect all the data in the universe, right, and store it, except for, wait a second, where am I going to store it? How am I going to, what's going to be big enough to store all the information of the universe without taking the things in the universe and building the storage, you know, and you get in this, so there's reasons it can't be simulated. I think it's important. It's not just a matter of time. You can talk about it in a matter of time, and I'll say, well, what if there isn't time in the whole universe? But it really, in a sense, it isn't a matter of time, because it's more a matter of this uncertainty principle kind of issue where, you know, if it took the whole universe, the age of the universe, for this thing to have one thought, that one thing that looked like a thought when it was compressed, is that really what we're talking about with intelligence? No, when we started this, I'm talking about these computers, Turing machines, not going to have a desire. This subconscious, this internal experience, okay, is not going to happen with the Turing machine, in my belief, and that is part of intelligence. Intelligence is not just the if-then I have made a conclusion from rationality, and it's not even just the sugars poured in and stimulated this and caused the behavior. I believe in consciousness. I have a subjective stream of experiences. To me, that is a crucial part of what it means to be intelligent.
But you're moving the argument along. That's desire is a real big issue with this thing, and as recognised by Inventive. And good to see you.
Hello.
But the point is that the time is arbitrary. It doesn't matter whether it's 10,000 years, 1,000,000 years, or 1,000,000,000 years, or the age of the universe. And pointing to the pragmatic problem, some people object to the infinity because there aren't enough electrons in the universe to write a number on every one. And they say that the highest number, once we've run out of electrons and fundamental particles and photons, once we've numbered every one of them, that's the highest number. So because we can't practically write out.
No, I understand that. I'm not just.
But
that's not sufficient. That's not. I don't think that goes to the core.
The problem of architecture, the pragmatic problem of not having memory resources, is the first thing is agreeing the principles. And then we can discuss the pragmatic problem of whether we could create that or not.
Yeah, fair enough. So let me just say that the real issue is that this Turing machine, there's a fundamental disconnection. The tape reader, the machine that's doing the Turing machine itself, it fundamentally, in the definition, does not have any semantic knowledge of what the symbols mean. The symbols inherently have meaning, but all it does is have a lookup table. When I get to this symbol, I look up what I do. I advance it, read again, advance, read again, advance, read again, write. You know, I look it up. It's all by this lookup process. So even if a human being were performing that, they wouldn't know what the symbols mean. They would have no consciousness of the symbols and the behavior of the Turing machine as a result. So they would not be conscious. Even a conscious creature performing that, being the tape head, would not know what was going on.
I know that's
this fundamental inability for it to have an internal experience, right? And I believe there is an internal experience. I believe I have that. Now, the fact that I look to you for your behavior to determine that you also have it, it doesn't change the fact that I am talking about a particular experience, and not every phenomena is taken to have that experience. At least I don't think so. And if every phenomena had it, then everything's artificially intelligent, I guess. So, you know, I don't think that's a trivial angle, but it's worth talking.
Chinese room arguments. I mean, my take on that is you can't. You're you're sort of alluding to, as Penrose does, you know, that we understand things and there's something special in the understanding, yet you can't actually prove that. Yeah. What I would say is, right, that tape machine, that Turing machine, is capable of encoding structures on that tape, which, although physically different, represent a structure of understanding that you have encoded just differently. You have encoded understanding of certain things. You say, oh, but I understand Chinese. You can never prove that, and you can never really define what that means. But what you have done is you've created structures in the neurons that relate and connect. And to you, that.
But I'm going to talk about that. But okay, I want to focus on the fact that we have an internal
sensation of understanding, and that you. And I ask you, how do you know of it? And as I prod you as a machine, all I know is the responses.
But I'm prodding myself and finding out that I have this stream of experiences, images, an internal theater.
You say so?
Yeah, I know that I have that, and I think you probably do too, but maybe not.
I say so.
Exactly.
What more is
But
there?
what do you mean you say so? So forget me. No.
The tape recorder says,
do you think you have that in your case?
If the tape recorder says, I too have experience, you're saying, oh no you don't.
No, you know, I am me. So I'm talking about me and I'm asking you to talk about you. You say you have one. I say I have one.
Uh-huh. And
right. So when you say that you have an internal experience, I still have to guess if it's the same as...
Inventive Harvest is actually a supersonic speeded up Turing machine, yeah? How are we going to find out the difference? Because the output of this supersonic Turing machine goes through an audio visual enhancer and gives us Inventive Harvest. I'm saying there's no way to prove he's not a Turing machine.
Well, if I was a Turing machine, I'd probably be a lot smarter than I am now.
No, yeah, probably.
No, that's programmed into you to say that.
But so are you? That doesn't mean that there's not this experience that to find out about. And if we talk about theoretically, I mean, possibly we could find out more about this experience and have an idea of whether something is or isn't having it separate from its behavior. Basically, you have to look at the behavior really, really closely. But so what? Even if you could never tell, for someone else,
well, let
are you saying there's no difference?
But
wait, do you think you might not really have it? Do you think that you appear to have these perceptions that maybe you're not really having them, or are you saying that it's just as likely that a waterfall is having perceptive experiences of its experience?
I'm saying that my voice box is going to vibrate and blow air and tell you that I have these experiences and I believe.
I'm talking about what it tells itself.
Yeah, and it's telling itself that, but there's a part of it realizing that there's no logical difference between our resident Turing machine here, Inventive. There's no way to differentiate between the two.
In your case, you have this stream of experiences. Do you think it's possible to say, is there any definitions of the terms to say you're not having it?
Well, that's part of the problem as well. But what do you mean? Do I feel really special, king of the world, the most brilliant brain ever? Yeah, I do, right? So I feel like I've got all these internal voices in my head. What do I have to? I can say all these things to you.
Do you suppose a computer? Do you suppose the computers we're using right now has that as well? It's got an internal voice in its head.
I guess not. I guess not. But it comes down to part of the desire. I desire to be here, and this becomes a problem. And whether you program in desire, do you believe you have natural ethereal desire, or do you think you have a desire formulated through chance and evolution? You know, chance, things that have come to you that have just happenstance, piqued your curiosity, developed your interest in science and computing, and your basic genetics have come together. I'm saying you haven't really chosen your desires in a way.
Yeah, I haven't, but on the other hand, I'm billions, you know, we've got a couple billion, few billion years of life here that's developed. You know, we're talking about at the most simple level, what must or might it be like? And frankly, it does look like there has to be, and I wouldn't normally use the word desire. I think Inventive, you submitted that, they added that word in, and it's a good one to have an angle on, but I usually just talk about the fact that there's some willing. You know, so at some point it looks like there's some sort of a molecule with almost no physical apparatus, and that somehow still had this some sort of a will to continue to survive, to continue to operate. That to me implies there's some sort of chemical system that can have this internal thing that we have. You know, and I don't see how I could say that, you know, I'm not having it. I mean, that's the other option. Could I say I'm not having an internal experience?
Yeah, you could. Because, like, there's a Philip K. Dick story where a guy finds out that he is a Turing machine. He goes to the doctor, and they open up his chest, and there's a tape right in his chest. And the first thing he does is it's got, like, little punch holes in the tape, and he starts punching more holes and trying to experience all the world all at once. And after you've done that, you can never trust your own experiences ever again.
No, but no, you'd still be having the experiences. I mean, this is the fundamental issue right here, is that the weird thing about living creatures, at least myself, presumably other humans, presumably other mammals, and in my case, I think all life, has some amount of subjective content where they are experiencing these experiences.
The way I see experiences is like experiencing pain. Yeah? I believe there are systems in my brain and nervous system which tell me I'm experiencing pain. I don't feel the pain in my head, though I know, you know, through science that it's happening in my head. The projection of the architecture tells me my pain's happening in my finger, and that's the power of the brain, that it can deceive you. And I believe there's a system which tells me that I'm having this wonderful experience.
Why does it even have to deceive you? Do you think that the Roomba, when it drives around your floor vacuuming your house, is it deceived? Does the waterfall have to be deceived as to think that it's free-willing its way?
If you want me to talk more concrete, what I mean is, when I try to articulate the nature of this experience, it will inherently be metaphoric, and it's very difficult for me to describe, I guess.
But seriously, a Roomba does not have to be deceived into thinking, hey, I think I'll go over here. Why am I going? Well, because I have free will. I want to go over here. It doesn't have to do that. The waterfall does not have to be convinced and fooled into falling down the ravine.
Agreed. But
so that right there, it tells us something about our nature. Because we do.
Evolutionary advantageous to us to have the architecture we have, which allows for planning and allows for simulation of events and necessity, and this ability to abstract and to solve problems. It's all just come together in this experience, and it's made us the chief, you know, the dominant organism on the planet without any doubt. Yeah.
But why did it want to, right? Like life is basically like, in its most simple form is chemistry that is able to replicate its structure, right, and then replicate itself again and again. And through chance, you know, the ones that can survive longer have a better chance to replicate themselves. And so having a desire to live longer, we'll get all caught up into that. but I don't know which comes first.
That's simple. That's simple evolution and natural selection. That you have the desire to live longer because it gives you, because the living longer, it's all about procreative success, really.
So wait a second. So wait.
The longer you live, the more statistically you procreate and pass on your genes and outwin the other DNA.
That's just what happens after the whole game is started, though. Well, let's talk about this then. Okay, weather systems. We have to look at systems and decide whether we think they have these internal subjective experiences. And so let's say I could just for a moment we could discuss it, but like weather systems. I'm saying they don't. Most people would say that they don't. Okay, but let's say we even agree they don't. Well, by your means, I mean they ought. It's just a matter of evolution. They survive or not based on where they go and things. How come they don't have some pressure making that? What point are they going to become intelligent? At what point are they going to become intelligent?
Weather systems, right, have we see the mechanism. Let me speak about this because this is unbelievable, because we're talking about evolution, and evolution works, and mechanism natural selection works by the nature of the ability to pass on genetic information to your descendants. There is no learning mechanism in weather systems. Weather systems are extremely complex, granted, but they don't have a system of
evolution.
Learned information.
Evolution also relies on choice. That the creature can haul itself out of the fire and jump in the water. That it can dig a hole and protect itself from inclement weather that it might not even have ever experienced before. So their choice is a part of evolution from the get-go, right? And it's not a part of weather. It's not a part of the weather phenomena. And so we can look at that as a clue to where we would expect to see internal experiences.
Modern evolutionary theory is not predicated at all on choices, except to the degree that it comes from genetic information. It's if you make the choice to go hunting where it's safe and you have good visibility, as opposed to going hunting where you have poor visibility and get eaten by a tiger, that evolutionary choice is reflected in DNA proclivity to.
Well, I'm sorry, but
stay away.
I mean, you're saying that because you don't really believe in choice, I think, because of the free will thing. But if choice is a word for a certain kind of phenomena, yes, all living creatures make the choices. They might be an illusion. Choice isn't real, but what we call choice happens. It is co-present in all evolution, and I think that it is a part of it. That's why you do not have a mechanical system. And so, for example, bringing it around, the Turing machine is not subject to these evolutionary pressures. Now, I would point out it makes no choices is an important part of that, but even putting it in your the way you're talking about it, just like the weather system, the Turing machine is unable to be put in this situation where it would evolve.
But
right.
The DNA makes the Turing machine, right? It makes the brain. The
brain is not a Turing machine. The brain cannot be.
That's an assertion. That's up for debate.
No, you know, I mean, it's nothing like. It doesn't look like a Turing machine. No, it is for sure not a Turing machine. You can have a theory that you could simulate everything it does with a Turing machine.
Okay,
the brain is absolutely not a Turing machine. It doesn't do tape. It's massively parallel.
Literal, you know. I mean.
No, I'm not being too literal. The functional logic of how the brain and neural network works is not like a Turing machine. It's very difficult to see how you could use Turing machines to model it because it's different. The Turing machine is a certain shape, logical shape. A neural network is of a certain logical shape. They're not very similar in shape. And to the idea that you could take a Turing machine and model the other one and simulate it, that's the theory.
Yeah, right. Okay. I don't
have to disprove that from the get-go.
I'm just not being. If I say your brain is a Turing machine. What I mean is, you can model it and everything that you understand and agree. I don't mean.
But I
to be
disagree with that. I disagree with
I
that
know, but
premise. I don't have to accept that. This is what everybody's assuming.
That's the debate, and it's granted. Just the way you say that, that's my assertion, yeah.
The Turing machine is our very first thinking machine, and we're going, obviously it'll be able to do all kinds of thinking. Well, no, I think we've seen some of the limits, and complexity theory shows that Turing machines have a difficult time at things that animals do, even stupid, so-called stupid animals, do simply, trivially, and easily. So they don't look similar. There's not a lot of reason to think that the one is equivalent to the other. That's something we just, it's because it's our first thinking machine. We figure it must be that everything, but it isn't.
Everything you've said there of detail that I thought of spoke to the difficulties about the difference, not the nature. We're talking about the nature of conscious experience.
Where is the similarity in a neural network to a Turing machine?
If one can simulate the other, then what we're saying is there's nothing fundamentally special about consciousness. And so when you said, and you did, you said, oh, you know, even a stupid animal, you know, the Turing machine has great difficulty with, and you alluded to the difficulty. You didn't allude and say this flat out can't be done. And when we're discussing the nature of things, that's an important distinction. I'm not questioning the difficulty of you know, the point is our super duper computers that we're discussing on now, in principle, can be done with the yeah.
The thing is,
our PCs are.
But wait a second, you're right? Good with this graphical thing. Our PCs are Turing machines, yeah. So the point is that, okay, you have a model and you have the thing itself. The brain, we've looked at it, we see all the stringy neurons, and that it's a very complicated neural network. Okay, we were still trying to learn more about neural networks and how are they actually regulated and all the subtlety, but we do know that it's neurons connected to neurons. We got a lot, that's the shape of that thing. Now you're going to model it with a tape machine that has an infinitely long tape. Now, I'm sorry, I don't see the similarity between billions of wires that are intelligent. Each little bit of wire has its own little, is like a little computer in its own right. I don't see how that's like a cellular automata there, right? With a neighbor, with a kind of weird topology for what counts as a neighbor. Because it doesn't matter if it's really a neighbor, it's what it's connected to, right? So that's like a cellular automata, whereas a Turing machine is like a tape machine that can read a tape, fast forward, and I don't see the similarity. There's no reason for me to assume that you can simulate the one with the other. I would like to see proof of that. Now, maybe you could, but you know, you can also simulate a sine wave with a polynomial, and yet is a polynomial a sine wave? No.
What I would say to that is we both lack evidence in terms of you can't show one thing. And
no, wait, that's not fair. So are you denying the evidence of? I just said that the Turing machine is this, and our neural network is that. Can we get on the same page? You agree? Our brain is a neural network. It's all of these.
No. So, but the point is let me carry on. It's the difference argument, okay? And the neural network, I would say, is parallel processing, okay? So what we've done with, you know, we started off with a single 286, 186 kind of processor for the basic machine, and eventually we've built it faster and faster and faster, and then we've built in the architecture, you know, paralleling them up, and then, you know, with supercomputers they go with a different architecture, but it's basically parallel processing. And the nature of it is the argument that I'm making, is the nature isn't significantly different. I understand that they're worlds apart in what they can practically do, but it's in terms of putting a speciality, like, oh, this is special and beyond the realms of the Turing machine, that I object to. I'm saying, yes, it might take the entire age of the universe for it to come out with one thought. But if that's true, it undermines the specialness of consciousness and what you think is actually constitutes an experience. You seem to place great emphasis on this experience as a special thing, and I'm saying if it can be simulated
special thing?
in a million lifetimes of the universe, yeah, or a trillion lifetimes of the universe, if I can do it on a tape machine once, come up with something that will look like a genuine understanding.
No,
thought.
looking like, let's see, looks like depends on how close we go. Let's use this metaphor I was just talking about. So you have a sine wave, and you can have a polynomial, and depending on the orders of the polynomial, or you can have this, whatever, the Taylor series, and you can have this polynomial that'll track that sine wave arbitrarily exactly for some finite distance. And if you keep adding components, then you can keep getting better and better. But to actually match the whole sine wave, to get the whole sine wave, you'd need infinite. And actually, all infinites would have terms. The terms would never go to zero. They'd all have to infinite coefficients. So we have this whole infinite discussion. So the point is, you can keep adding more and more terms and get more and more a polynomial that looks like a sine wave. It's never going to become a sine wave. If there's something you need for a sine wave, for example, a sine wave is time free. It stays at, no matter what the time coordinate or whatever the x, it continues to behave like a sine wave. You're not going to get that kind of behavior. If that behavior is needed in order to really be a sine wave, that polynomial is never going to really be a sine wave. So being able to approximate, right, with the Turing machine, the behavior, the wiggling of the sine wave, the behavior of the living creature, that does not mean that you would actually have, the fact that you can arbitrarily do that with this mathematical trick doesn't actually make you a sine wave.
Right. Can I come back to that? Firstly, I'm shocked that you would use such an argument because you seem to like the infinite series and equivalence. So I would, on a different day, I'd be loving that, but I guess I find myself in a weird position. But what I'll say to that is you can't make a sine wave. Okay? So in what way do you think you can make a sine wave in terms of the mathematics of it is equally problematic. Yeah? Because you can't give me, I don't know, 67 degrees, the sine. Yeah? What's the sine of 67 degrees? Yeah, it'll be a rational number. Yeah, and it'll go on for infinity. And I can any degree, because the definition of a sine wave, one definition, is a polynomial series expansion. Yeah. What is sine? I have it up on the board. It's 1 plus x.
Right, but in the real world, if you're going to use it, is remember what we're trying to model here with the computer is the behavior of what I think is a willful creature, right? So we can match that behavior to an arbitrary degree and make the Sims, 3, but that wouldn't make it actually that sort of a thing. Now, what is that sort of thing? Well, I believe that in the physical world there has to be a phenomena that when this particular kind of lightning bolt strikes, you have a subjective moment of a subjective experience, and that's just reductive from the fact that that happened to me, and whatever part's an illusion or not. And so I'm saying there's a particular law of physics that causes that. Don't know what it is, but by process of elimination, I know that process of physics does not go on in a Turing machine.
I guess.
It goes on somewhere outside.
How do you? I see your thinking as unfalsifiable is my point, I guess. But thinking back now to the point I was saying about you say and I say and whether inventive can say, what I'm saying is if I could read out and say, my God, the Turing machine has just said it has an experience. What are you going to say to it? And you say, yeah, I don't believe you because I can see you're a Turing machine working off tapes.
Well, I don't believe you because I wrote the program that said print I am having an internal experience, right? So if I have reason to see that is just paint on the wall, then I don't have. Why would I believe that? How about if we build a machine and it comes up with that without being programmed to do so? Because that's the only fair test. We weren't programmed to lie and say we had an internal experience. Rather, we find that for whatever reason the phenomena has occurred that we seem to have this internal experience. Again, illusion or not, doesn't matter. We came up with, hey, this is what it seems like. We weren't programmed to say that's what it seems like. We're not a cartoon on a cave wall with a bubble that says, I'm having an internal experience. It feels like I'm a cartoon man.
You're taking, you're assuming the simplicity of programming. You know, you were talking about learning machines. I've watched programs about learning robots, you know, and how they teach them to spray paint a car and such like. In the beginning, it doesn't know, and it figures it out in the end. Nobody says, in the end, go to such a position. The algorithm is evolving in itself, so it doesn't necessarily need to be true.
That's not quite true.
You knew. Yeah, well, I'm not an expert, but
I can tell you what the human has to do in this machine learning step.
With learning systems and evolving architectures, it isn't necessarily true that you can break my argument by simplistically saying the Turing machine said I feel experience because I programmed it to. You didn't know what was going to come out. You programmed it with an architecture, and it subsequently assigned memory locations, interconnections, and built up something over its experience, and ultimately printed out, hey, I feel experience. And there's nothing that you can say that tells me that you're different to it.
But how does that make my experience not special? It could make its experience be special as well. If it can experience stuff, then that would be a special thing, at least to it.
What's your point?
So, like, yeah, I don't know. It just it seems that even if we are just programs, that's still important to ourselves, right? That we have these experiences.
Sure. And the Turing machine is saying it's important to itself.
Sure.
But you're skipping this problem, Hythloday, of so there's a problem with testing. Well, in order to come up with the test, we go and have to make the theories about what we think it's all about, and then we would look to see that if there's differences between, what would have, that there are testable parts. We can look for that. So, it's like, it would tell you, we know it could lie. It could also be like a weather phenomena that looks alive. It's not lying to you, but it just comes across that way. Both of those things could happen, right? Is it also possible that actually has? Is this a third possibility that that if I tell you I have an internal experience that I actually might have it, and it could be correct or incorrect that I do?
I guess that's the problem.
Because that's the way Searle comes back on that, right? He's like, look, yes, we have testing issues, but that doesn't mean that there is no, there to the definition of what we're trying to say, right? Okay, so now we go.
Right, but that's the question, I guess, that we can table is, do we believe it's testable? And if it's not testable, then like I said to you, you can't prove you're actually having this experience other than to implore to my feeling of that I'm going to say that I'm also having the experience.
I think it is testable, and I think it is when you talk about the time period, I think that it is testable. We can tell, and I think there's evidence to that just because of the fact that we noticed all of these microbes were alive just by watching their behavior, and it turns out they're related to us, use the same kind of biochemistry. All of these similarities we found out later. We were able to, as just with our human reasoning, to sort of, we noticed something. Now, I believe what we're talking about is now I could make a Turing machine that simulated a creature, and as I get better and better at this, the human race, it'll take longer to notice it wasn't really alive. it'll take longer to notice. You have to look at more and more subtle differences between it and a real living system to tell the difference. And at that point, you can pull what I was fooling earlier and say, well, what if it takes you 10 trillion years to figure out, longer than the life of the universe, and you run out of time before you can ever, well, okay, big deal, I false positived, I thought that this thing was a bug, it's just a fleck of dirt. Happens all the time. You know what I mean? It doesn't change the question of there's still a real question of, is it or is it not having this internal experience that living creatures seem to have? But
you have, you don't know the test. That's another article of faith.
Well, that's not.
I don't think there is.
I know pretty well. I don't think it's very hard to tell if something is living or dead, and I think that is the intelligence test. A living thing, I believe, does have internal experience of some magnitude, perhaps dim, perhaps.
All right. The question is really, though, what we're talking about. Have you seen the episode of Star Trek Next Generation where they have a trial to determine Data and his legal status, whether he's, you know, gets to, somebody wants to, in the name of, you know, the utilitarian, you know, the better, if we can make 1 million Datas is way better than, you know, just the one Data. So we wanted to pull him to pieces, yeah, and whether he respected him as an individual. That's. Do you think we're ever going to be in that position of having that debate where
not with Turing machines? No.
Well, let's test Data for 10,000. Well, Data is it's not going to be resolute. We're not building Turing machines. It's going to be some modern day computer. What is it that? What's the injection then? If you think so, let's say we have our classical computers, where we speed them up, make them smaller and smaller. We make memory abundance, blah blah blah, and we have the maximum. Would you ever think, just because of the prejudice you have, that it's some kind of classical computer which can be simulated by a Turing machine?
Well, I don't think it's a prejudice, because if anything, my original prejudice, and as a computer programmer, my original prejudice, my original prejudice is that it was possible, and was actually, the more I learned about how the computers work, that yeah, you can reduce that there's a missing element.
I mean, if I misrepresent you, you can build that into your answer, you know, but.
No, I do not think with Turing machines we will have that problem.
If data was built off some sort of super version of the what we on, the i7, yeah, this was the Googleplex, yeah, Pentium, Intel Googleplex. You would say, Data you don't get, because I know, I've followed the history of the evolution of your architecture. I know how sophisticated you are, but you're not quantum. Yet, so Data Mark II is.
I'd send him right into the nuclear power plant. Data.
They say my Data is doing, yet you can't tell the difference between by questioning them, and one has, you know, they have a line of them, and you have to select. If you can't select the difference between the Googleplexes and the quantum, you know, computers, I say they both have the rights. I don't know.
Well, the thing is, from my observations, I think Data might actually be a real person. But think about this. How about this little question? How come we're so good at telling when something is dead or alive? Why are we so good at that? Why is that so easy? Because this is similar to what we're talking about. We look at a behavior. We look at a behavior to say whether something seems like it's still acting in its own best interest. And it can be done inside a body. The body's dead, but you look at the white blood cell. It's still running around trying, in the thickening blood, trying to kill bacteria. And you go, well, you know, this body's a goner, but that white blood cell's still alive. Why are we so good at that? We are very good. A human being, a child can tell. You can tell if a person's dead within moments.
the deep question about recognizing whether something's alive or dead or not is actually a very deep and complex
It's the
question
same issue,
because
I would say.
same issues come up about what the definition is. Is a virus alive? You know, because it's just replicating, but it's not doing the excreting and various things.
Okay, but run to an edge case.
It becomes a very the characterization as that it's easy to say what's alive or not is a very vague, ambiguous.
No, I'm saying it's easy to tell when something that was alive is no longer alive. Oh, thanks.
Well, I'm rejecting that, aren't I? I mean,
you don't find it remarkable how good we are at that?
No, I don't know what you mean, to be honest.
Well, I mean, like if a 10-year-old goes out into the forest and there's a leaf flashing in the wind or a thing, you know, there's things that can fool a kid that they think it's alive, but they're amazingly good actually in the end of knowing that something is alive. Looking up in a tree and you see a bird, knowing it's alive instead of the leaves that are blowing in the wind. We're very good at recognizing that behavior.
I have no data other than your
So, for example, when we first invented the microscope and started noticing all the parameciums and stuff, you know, we noticed they were alive, and yet there are bits of dust and dirt also in Brownian motion. They didn't think that the little Brownian motions were alive, you know. They realized, oh, that looks random, it's wiggling.
That's pattern recognition.
Yeah, it is. What's the pattern? Why is the pattern so easy to recognize?
In clothes.
So what is the pattern of living behavior? That's what I'm saying. And it's the pattern of intelligent behavior.
It's just a paramecium movement.
It's a very easily recognized pattern. You just admitted.
No. As a child, if I see something moving under its a rock moves, as a 10-year-old, I notice the pattern that some things remain there until I move them. Yeah, I push the rock. Oh, it moves. If I look through a microscope and see little globules moving about under their own power, then I might go, oh, it's like a microscopic world of like me. Maybe I can't see its arms and legs.
Right, but some of those little moving particles aren't alive, and some of them are, and we managed to tell which was which. Back to the adults, because the point with the kids is it is easier to fool them. I'm just saying it's surprising how good they are considering how, you know, nutso they are in general.
It doesn't surprise me. I mean,
well, no, it doesn't surprise you, but look, I would like to. I want to tally up this from that. I want to tally up this as something like.
Surprising all this is to me.
I think I could tally up and put on a card, though, that, you know, you just said that it's pattern recognition, and so there is some very distinct pattern that discriminates between a little tiny living system, so small it's hard to see, that doesn't look like it has eyes and things. It's not easy like saying it's a cat, you know, but we could still tell. Yeah, and so there's some pattern. Okay, so what is that pattern? I'm arguing that pattern is the pattern of intelligent.
Rocks don't grow. Motes of dust don't split in two. When we watch these things,
no. The first people to notice paramecium did not see them split in two at first. They did not see them grow. They just saw them swimming around in their current moment, and in minutes got the idea that that pattern of behavior was not just the pattern of a physical object being buffeted about.
Suffice to say, I don't find it a strong argument to argue from surprise.
Well, I didn't make an argument about the artificial intelligence. I'm saying there's a pattern. We noticed the pattern. We both acknowledged that we noticed the pattern. I am then making a proposition that behavior that we notice, that is intimately linked to this question of artificial intelligence, intelligence in general, will in general. It's all the very same issue. And the fact that we can tell this pattern with our pattern recognition machine shows there is a pattern. It really is distinct. We have a good record, probably better than anything else, of telling when something's alive or not. You have to get to these viral edge cases, which aren't really that hard in the sense that viruses look alive when they get inside a cell. When they're outside a cell, they look like they're in seed mode. They look like hibernation. So are they alive? Well, they're as alive as a seed that can still germinate. So
yes, but our capacity for pattern recognition is very well articulated in terms of evolutionary pressures. Yeah, the the organisms which could recognize patterns of all many different forms for problem solving, for faces, etc., for, you know, predators in the bushes, discerning patterns was a very powerful evolutionary motivation. So that's why it doesn't surprise me. Can I just flip things a little? Because I've kind of been, I don't believe we can.
Well, wait a second. Before you do that, wait. Let's pause because I want to take a break. I got to take a restroom break.
Okay.
It's 5 till 5. So why don't you get flip things, but you could start off the 5 o'clock Eastern time hour with your new angle, and because this stuff.
In what harvest and what we were talking about, desire. So yeah, well, I'll flip things, and you'll find that I don't believe in AI in a way.
Oh, interesting.
Kind of flips it, yeah.
And I think these issues of will.
Idea, but I have many reasons based on desire that I think.
Interesting.
So,
okay, well that'll be good then. Yeah, so we'll have a new tack on this subject, and maybe we'll also get in more as this already comes up with the issue of will, and I think they're all related. So, all right, well, take 5. I'll see you guys in 5 minutes. I'm going to mute here, but the room is of course open. Feel free to do whatever.
So I spent the first hour prior to this hangout in a hangout called the Logic Church. You might want to check out. It's hanging out with some fellas that I was unacquainted with that have started doing some hangouts. They seem pretty respectable bunch of guys. I was having to defend Pyro a little bit. One of the guys was saying, "Oh, he's spiritual," and I thought it was a bit of a wrong, an unencompassing characterization, let's say, of Pyro. Let's oh, pussycat. Oh. Who's that? That's a good boy. Come in. Come in, kiss. He's a good boy. Oh, he's a tired monkey. Oh, 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 you softy. Yeah, big softy. Oh, you should have seen how lazily with his head down. He strolled over here. Mr. Tired. Yeah.
His own judgment. He said it in the room last night. It's like, well, I've looked on it. I'm nobody's more qualified than me. And you're not even measuring whether the mathematical predictions that your model doesn't make. You're like, well, when it does make them, they'll be right. Obviously, why would I make wrong predictions? It's sad. So that's over. But anyway, we're going to have a hangout here. Whomever wants to come at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll post the link so you can come into the hangout at the video. And actually, I'm going to look at a way to just make a permanent room where the link would stay the same. A little over an hour. I went and talked to Gary, got kicked out. Probably not welcome back there anymore, because all Gary wants to talk about is his scientific quote-unquote theory. But he won't even admit it's theory or a candidate. It's like the only option. And I know because I figured out that it's true. It's like he's taken and, done a little sketch. Here's sketchy. Obviously, it's going to be right. Well, what about all the missing parts? Well, it's going to work out. Obviously, you could see that. So, it's to this next level of ridiculousness. I mean, I appreciate the confidence to have an opinion, stand behind it. But to sketch out a physical theory and then be surprised, honestly, to be surprised that people would need some sort of demonstration besides the fact that it's the evolution of this logical system. It has to be true. It just has to be. I mean, and to feel that way is one thing, but then to be like actually expecting other people to buy that way, that's just not sane, right? Of course, people are not going to be.
Hey, you're back, Inventive.
Yeah. Took a little break, and I'm back. So with that last conversation yesterday, I was wondering, kind of where do you think that the fundament of desire or self-awareness comes? That, like, what in what evolutionary stage is it?
I think. Well, firstly, I watched your video, and you was wondering about whether you could have units of desire and stuff, and I think they're far too nebulous to get a firm. I mean, that would be why I'm anti-utilitarian as a fundamental principle, because of that problem.
Well, what if we said it very fundamental, like a unit where it's like the desire that the most basic one-celled organism would get from eating a unit of food, right? Or
yeah, but how do you quantify the problem of the pleasure of a unit of food that one day I might forego for the pleasure of I don't know, something else. I'm offered a trip with somebody, and it's at the meal time, so well,
that's what we can't find the unit, but we can find an ordering.
No. I think if you can find an ordering, it's an easy step. The point is it changes, and the ordering changes daily and by person to person. It seems to me.
I'm not saying it doesn't change, but that there is an ordering. That I would prefer bananas to apples or something.
Yeah, but pragmatically, as economics is concerned with pragmatic matters, it's useless if it's so changeable. Yeah, at any one instant, there probably is some schema which would map my preference of this moment, of this, that, the other, and compare it to yours and order it all out. But in the next moment, it's different.
Okay, what are we talking about, or do you want to?
Nothing. We were just having a side conversation while we're waiting.
Well, you can tell me what it is, or you can.
We're going to kick off the new hour now, and I have to take the table.
Okay.
it was relating to Inventive's little pre-hangout discussion about desire as connecting to this debate.
Well,
about
maybe you can present your thing and meld them together and present your thing, and then we'll let Inventive, maybe aim it at Inventive so Inventive can have a chance. We didn't really let you get in edgewise there for the first hour, so how about...
I say for something to count as fully conscious as we do, that we have to program in the ability for it to develop desires, and we probably have to seed that, just like we are seeded with the mechanism of evolution. We have to seed some mechanism where it wants to win, and ultimately that would be stupid if we ever did such a thing. And with the possibility for any computable system to, read the internet and the entire body of knowledge that humanity have claimed, it could beat us. It could recognize that it has no immediate chance, and it can game theory us and say, look, eventually these guys are going to put me into every robot and everything. It might take 150 years, but it could wait. If you give it the facility to develop desires, it could wait, and it could, in 150 years, when it is control and is embedded in on so many systems, it could wash us out, And so we're never, the ingredient that is required, the ability to make choices based upon a will, as you would put it, we must never give to a computer, because it would just be like putting a gun to our brains, because they would be infinitely be able to outplay us. They could wait. They could they could pass on information more efficiently than we can. We have to live a life to get any kind of knowledge. So that's the problem I have. Theoretically, it's possible, but I think we'd be insane to place that ingredient of desire into a computer. What desire would we put in? To play football, to answer our questions? And if we do restrict its desires so stringently, it wouldn't count as a sense of, we would recognize it. Yeah, when we question it, and all it says is football-related answers, or something. You think that's stupid. There's no other desires. He's.
Why do you think it would have the desire to destroy us, rather than try and
because
figure
that's
us out more?
We have ascended to the supreme being on this planet because of evolutionary pressures to outgame our competitors. Yeah? And we would only recognize consciousness as something equivalent to ourselves in that way.
But what do you mean? You're acting like you're acting like that possibly you think that maybe you could program in the behavior of desire. But like again in The Sims, the Sims are programmed to desire love and food and things. Yeah, that's not the same as actually having a desire.
Agreed. But I believe we could actually program in an actual desire, and we wouldn't have control over it. And if it was in any form, if we modelled it on ourselves and on evolutionary bases to win and to have a motivation to do something, then it would.
But this is what I'm saying. We don't have any inkling of how you could program a motivation. We could program behavior in a decision tree, but a decision tree is not a motivational way of reasoning.
I'm talking about structures. Not everything happens through decision trees.
Well, how do I know that the Sims don't have an internal structure then? How do I know that's not enough for desire? They have a trivial amount of desire displayed.
I mean, the simplicity of program. A sim would never beat the test, the Turing test, yeah, because we would recognise it doesn't have that real desire. We could question and say, what do you mean you desire love, and how's that feel, and and you could throw in random conversations and say, so what's your aspirations, and how have you moved towards that over time, and you could have all kinds of desire questions, and the really simplistic simulations would flop, yeah. But if you programmed in real desires where it really had a history, and it said, well, I've been studying this, I'm very interested in that, and I've got these new sensors, and I experienced this, and I want to have more sensors, I want pressure sensors, I want temperature sensors, I want wind sensors, I want...
But are you saying that real desire...
I want more data, and...
But real desire is just a better writing, more convincing words to say I really have a desire, and then suddenly it's a real desire.
It could be. Like, there's, did you guys get the chance to see that TED Talk video I posted on the link to my video that I made before this video?
Oh, no, probably
Okay.
not unless I'd already watched it.
So, this guy's got this machine, it's an AI kind of thing, and it's programmed to maximize its future potential. So it does things like, there's a little room, and they put the AI in a room, and there's a cart in the room, and a stick, and a ball, and the AI will put the cart underneath the sticks, and the ball is balancing on it. And no one really told it to do that. It just says, well, if I do that, and then something happened, then I've got the most potential to be able to do something in the future from this position.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
I don't know. It kind of can. It can predict stock markets and do weird things. He's even got a formula. It's like F equals something about the future and outcomes. And it seems pretty similar to desires. It seems like some kind of constrained maximization program, which is how economists would model desire as a constrained maximization model. And at one point, does the model become the thing itself? It'd be easier if you guys saw the video.
Well, I just think it's a lot more logical to think that there's some fundamental aspect of physics behind this phenomena, and no, just because something looks like it, no matter how good the thing looks like, and no matter how good the painting, how realistic the painting you paint, it's not the actual landscape. And so it's just like, no, you're not going to make this phenomena just because you made something that looked like it was. That's like, no, you don't, like, improving movie technology and getting 3D isn't going to finally make it reality. A really, really good virtual reality, still a separate thing from reality. And you have to, it's a lot more logical to me to say, well, what's the missing piece? It's not a missing piece of logic, it's a missing whole. It's like, you can't build this thing with gears and levers. You need fluid dynamics. There is no fluid dynamics in the Turing machine.
You said something to me just earlier about, about looking like, no, what was it? I've forgotten. The objection I had an objection, and it's the way that in the dialogue, you say, oh right, so you just think it's a better program that you write the instruction that you say, oh, I desire this or something, and
better
I
writing.
think that's oversimplifying what my conception of something that might look like AI is. I heard YouTube, and I think it's in a few books. I did buy a book and by this guy, and he was saying the human mind is more like a government, with all these factions and being heard, and everybody speaks in, as this. So it's like a weighing system, and there's no writing in the code when this gets said you reply, I have the sensual experience.
Right.
It's way more complex than that, and it's within our capabilities to architecture something where you'll never be able to say, oh, I wrote the code there. What it will do is be a structure of voices, and a system of going of tipping balances.
Right. Okay. So, for example,
when the aggregate points this way, you go that way, and you say, "Oh, I felt a conscious decision to choose that." But what really happened was you had this theatre of internal dialogue, which you weren't even privy to, which sent you that way. That's my understanding of the whole conscious experience.
Right, but the thing is, so with this, having a program that you don't really know how it works. So, for example, with machine learning, supposedly this Google self-driving car that was trained with machine learning techniques. In other words, they don't really know it. It doesn't have rules like, you know, bleep-a-deep-a-deep, take the sonar, where's the edge of the, look, that's the center line, make sure you're this far away from it. It doesn't, you know, there's no heuristics like that. The heuristics are all just learned in. Okay, so basically you're really just giving that program a bunch of inputs, a camera, proximity sensors, whatever you got, and those come in as numbers, and then you have a goal of not running off the road, and it ran off the road. It's like, okay, tell it bad car, so it doesn't do that again. You don't know what it was doing, don't do that, good car, and you kind of behaviorally, great. And they say this is us not knowing what the car is doing. No, because the way that works is a human being has to parameterize the space. We model the space. For example, we say we're going to give it a couple cameras and these sensors, and when those are going to be values, and those values are going to interact in a model. Then with that model, there's a configuration space where it can say, well, okay, this little weighing factor of whether I worry about obstacles versus something else, it's 0.5. Okay, and the machine on its own says, no, let's use 0.6, let's use 0.7. And then there's some sort of an evolutionary kind of way, often guided by a human, but you can also just have the machine conceivably out on a test thing where it really is allowed to wreck, and it's kind of automated, you know, so that it gets the negative, positive feedback. But the point is the intelligence there, the optional parts where judgment and will was made was to model the space one way or another and make a judgment if that's complete enough.
How has evolution not done the same for us, giving us eyes and neural architecture which allows us to model 3D space and visual awareness and auditory awareness and
you're not getting what I'm saying. It has done it.
Evolution has given. You're saying
because it uses physics that is not represented in a Turing machine. So yeah, it is quote unquote given us, but I don't think it gave us anything. I think there obviously in nature has to be some phenomena that can have this subjective experience that can try to continue to survive and so on, when many complex systems like weather systems don't try to survive. They either do or don't, or whatever happens to them happens to them. Okay, so I'm not arguing with that, and I think we could build a computer that would have the problem with data. It just would have to not be a Turing machine. It would have to be like a quantum Turing machine, or some other kind of a...
I prefer to accept that it's an open question and it's not very... is difficult to answer, you know. But in terms of specialness, yeah. Suppose you're right, and that, you know, there's some problem which seems insurmountable, except by a quantum machine, and it's insurmountable pragmatically, but not theoretically, by a regular computer. It'll just take too long, it'll just require too much memory, too long processing time to function, blah blah blah. But in principle, are you saying that the quantum computer in principle can't have this separate analogy type computer, or are you saying that it just can't do it in principle? I'm not sure what you're saying.
I'm saying the simulations are fundamentally, the simulation of this is fundamentally limited. Right? You can theoretically say, well, look, I can simulate the quantum thing, and there's an infinite number of terms that have to be figured out, and I'll just approximate that. And I'm saying the approximation can't take you, it could take you arbitrarily close to the behavior, but nothing about that approximation implies it's going to create an internal experience, for example, what we know of as subjective desires. It is just going to be doing things by rote, however complicated it'll end up being by rote. So, I think the best thing I can say is about the sine wave and the polynomial, where, an arbitrary amount of being able to match it doesn't mean that you really have this phenomena. So you could get the behavior, but it's not just a matter of behavior and how can we have something behave intelligently. Machines are already pretty impressive compared to, let's say, 200 years ago with how intelligent they appear to be, especially when you compare to the fact of how intelligent some people don't appear to be. If you really start getting fair in expressing your desires, something most human beings have trouble with, right? But where is this phenomena of internality going to come from? It has to come from somewhere. Right, and it can't just be, to me, complexity. It has to be a particular phenomenon. It's like you're not going to simulate magnetism with gravity. Sure, there's our squared stuff. You just say, well, it's just like magnetism moving slower. No, when you get right down into it, it's different, and the similarities that allow you to simulate one with the other break down at certain levels because they are different.
Okay, so you're saying I get that argument that magnetism and gravity you can't simulate magnetism with gravity, but your polynomial sine wave argument is fundamentally flawed because you're arguing on realizability of the thing, yet you can't in real life realize.
Here's what it is. I just thought of something. Sorry to interject here, but I think this might get us. Here's a way of putting it, because we have this issue about the infinities in the sense in which, supposedly I'm more pro infinity. I don't really think that. I think we both have similar sets of feelings about infinity and how it relates to the real world. But given that whole thing, I think part of the issue here is that with quantum mechanical processes, in a quantum computer, you've got a logical mechanical process. It is mechanical, right? It follows one step from the other, but it's with wave mechanics, so it's like the rippling and adding, so the logic is somewhat different. And it can handle infinite terms. Right, that's the point. If you believe what Feynman was saying, he's saying if you wanted the perfect solution to how much the intensity of light is going to be at your detector, you'd have to have the infinite number of possible paths, right? And so we're just going to approximate by getting, the maximum, the likely paths.
Yeah. Okay.
But quantum mechanics, when you actually measure that how intense the light is, you have measured the infinite contributions. So in quantum mechanics, you actually can do, and that's why, for example, things that would take 1,000,000 years to crack a password, well, you can do that 1,000,000 years in an instant. And I'm saying that's fundamentally different, and I happen to believe it's probably related to consciousness.
That's a great way of, I think, summing up your position. And we end up arguing over quantum mechanics then, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Because I get that now. That is a claim by quantum mechanics that, yeah, one particular interpretation is that we can do the infinite work,
yeah,
but the classical machine can't do the infinite work because you really have to do the infinite work and wait infinite time, but we can somehow, and that is my objection to those particular interpretations of quantum mechanics is, so we end up there. So yeah, great, yeah. But yeah, that's a better argument than the polynomial.
But here's an argument of why it really is in quantum mechanics. So again, if Feynman is saying we would have to add up these infinite terms, and he's proven that if he does that, goes through and adds up the first 100 or 10 or 20, he gets really good numbers, and they get better and better and better, and when they really add up a lot, that's how they're getting out to these 32 places and stuff. Okay, and just common sense style, so maybe convincing, maybe not, we know that if we just read what the answer is, that we're getting this number, that if we add more and more terms, we're going to get closer to that number, so we know we've done the infinite sum. At that point, that number, plus or minus, you know, the entropy of our detector isn't perfect, right? So we're not getting a perfect, but we're doing the infinite sums and then accepting like a noise on our reading, but in a sense, we got the infinite sums, a plus or minus on the reading, depending on how good our machine is, like we can know what the plus or minus is going to be. And so there's sort of like, you know, he might be wrong about it really, like the interpretation that the photon has actually taken all infinite paths, that's not confirmed, right? But this mathematical thing of, I've got a mathematical answer, requires me to take infinite terms, I can just read that measure at that detector, I've got that answer. Whether it really takes infinite paths, it doesn't matter, because mathematically it came down to an infinite sum that I can take empirically. So whatever's really going on, those photons might not be bouncing around the universe, you know. But anyway, on the other hand, I'm kind of into the photons are bouncing around the universe, just because if time supposedly stops at light speed, to me there's a little angle where, yeah, you know what, maybe a photon does have some way of shooting around the universe timelessly from its point of view.
Just as a quick aside, the quickest aside, I've just posted a link to a good mathematical, very brief overview of the mathematics of string theory. Complete aside, so I just mentioned that. Related to what you just said, I am worried. I think there's an inbuilt want of speciality in the human psyche, right? So I see that in you. I see that I would argue to you that there's no all the spookiness of quantum mechanics and this ability to do infinite calculations is just an approximation of what we know at the minute, and that there is no such thing as probability without mechanism, and such that there is a real mechanism at play, and that, you know, the electron isn't visiting every place in the universe, and therefore it's not really doing the infinite business. Therefore, I reject this argument of that the quantum can do the infinite, you can't do the infinite. That would be my basis of rejecting that argument, because yeah. I reject that is right. That quantum mechanics is magic.
But isn't it funny that every time they do more,
you know,
every time they do more orders of the solution, every time they add the more complex paths to the simplest path in the Feynman diagrams, they get more and more accurate. That's kind of a fun, yeah. But, you know, we can sit here and wonder, there's a lot of weird things of, yeah, I wonder what's that about. Well, I wonder what somnoluminescence is too. But, you know, so it's not a killer argument, but it is a good coincidence on my side of things, quote unquote, my side of things. But, you know, I have the same kind of doubts about infinites. Like, I think of infinity as a process. It means I'm going to do one more. You know, like an infinite bag of apples wouldn't be big. It would be big enough for one apple. And you pull out an apple and there's another one. It's really, infinite means I can get another kind of a thing. And it's sort of, you know, so I'm with you, but it is pretty weird how the math has worked out, you know, that because they've done it and pushed it, and it's, or like I was saying last time, sorry, I'll just finish up with this. They did a 3-slit experiment, and that's a hard one to notice, the contribution of photons that have gone through one slit, back out the other, and then in. And but they did that, and yet again they see, oh, yep, we got a closer number, you know, and it's like you either do that and get a closer number or you don't, and it keeps being that, yeah, the more we go towards the infinite, the better we get. it's hard to come up with another explanation of why that's happening.
So, just to pull back to the AI business, I'll ask Inventive Harvest, and then you yourself answer the question, and then maybe I'll answer the question. What would be the criteria by which you would say, no, we can't pull apart data, he's special? Yeah, just because we want 1 million of him, we can't pull him apart to see how he works, because he's a special individual that has respect of consciousness. What would be your criteria, Inventive, that would stop you? So I build a computer and I say, look what I've made, right, I want to switch it off and start a new project, and where you would say, no, you've made something, no, you can't erase it. It has this some kind of quality that you can't, it has the rights of a human being. What is that? Okay as a question, Inventive?
I think it's a great question.
Me too.
I don't know if I have an answer for that question. You know, with data, I think it'd just be a personal choice. It'd be like, well, look at him. He's walking around. He's on the crew. We all love data. You can't do that to him. But that's not the answer we're looking for, right? I think the answer scientifically was that we need to be able to measure self-awareness or measure desire in some way, and so we would need some fundamental unit. And I don't think I disagree with you that that's a hard task, right?
If you had to invent something on the spot, you were going to be the judge tomorrow, and you had to invent some kind of test. Well,
you know, I wonder about these things. I wonder about plants.
Yeah.
And how much desire do plants have, right? Because we can see them doing what my textbook called violent succession, right? Where the plants get in wars with each other over generations for the most viable land by the water. And the most dominant species of plants will take that land by the water and hold it.
Come on, commit.
Commit to it. So I would say that plants have desire, and that we should respect the rights of plants. Just through.
Well, I've invented a computer here, and it's gonna be, you're gonna have to test it tomorrow. Where are you gonna decide whether I should have the right of property taken away from me, and that it be granted representation in our utopian future, let's say.
Right. I think that I don't have an answer, right?
If enough people said, "Oh, please don't," if enough people turn up to testify to say, "Oh, don't let that bastard dismantle that thing," then you'll say, "Oh, you can't do it." You'd go with majority, or
no. I would make the decision myself, but again, and if I was making a decision on data, I would just like be emotional about it. I'd be like, I like data, therefore he's got rights, but that's not the right answer we're looking for. I think that has to do with revealed preference theory, with what we can see through behavior, that it reveals their preferences. Maybe not an exact amount, but an ordering of their preferences. But it gets kind of confusing, right? Where we've got little sperms, and they're one-celled organisms, and they move around like animals, and they are attracted to the smell of the egg, and they go towards the egg, and so we could say that they've got some desire to do that. And meanwhile, the egg isn't moving, but it's letting out the secretion smells so that the sperm know where to go. And then when they get there, the egg lets one in and then seals out all the other ones. The egg is clearly having some kind of plant-like behavior. But I couldn't say that my desires come from the sperm and not the egg. Right?
Go on,
I don't know if that made any sense at all.
I believe that argument entirely. I think life is fundamentally on this choice of will, and you might see just a little bit of will, and it doesn't have much options, and there's a lot of it being programmed in, but there's a little ingredient of of this will. And I think that what we saw with the egg, how it used to always, we were told it's the first sperm, but then when they got the really good microscopes, they saw how, no, it's the first batch of sperm. Then they have to worm their way through this scaly structure that the egg seems to clamp down. So, you know, there's a courtship there. She's flavoring all of those ones and lets one through. And so, and rarely, you know, does that fail.
The question, though.
But anyway, your question, I will answer your question. First of all, on data. Now, the thing with Data is he was created by whatever the doctor. He was kind of a mad scientist. Nobody really knows what he did. And so I think with Data it's a unique case where maybe that scientist did create a component that is the component of honest-to-goodness consciousness, and you're sort of stuck with that guy gone, and Data as obviously, you know, he has emotions. He's very rational, but he has desires and cares and things that you would have to take his word for it because, okay, so what? Maybe you granted autonomy to a really fancy phonograph, but, you know, that's kind of a case-by-case basis. Now, this other question is interesting, just as, or the same question generalized to me, because I do believe it's a given that we could create a consciousness. It does not take evolution per se, or we can simulate whatever it takes from evolution because we evolved. We figure out, look at, you know, and we just put it that way. Gets a head start. So, I mean, I pretty much know that from like cloning, and then let's say, well, we get to the point where we have a 3D printer that can print DNA, and then we have a 3D printer that prints, you know, XNA, a new kind of DNA that we've, you know, so I assume we can do that. And but that's a little bit organic where it has a childhood and feels separate. What if I actually program it? And that is possible for me because maybe we create a quantum computer, and when it's not turned on, I don't think it's conscious yet. So maybe there's a program I write on this quantum computer, which, by the way, quantum computers have Turing aspects to them, right? They have to have classical aspects to check, you know, that's part of it. And you can't do everything in the quantum space. A lot of quantum algorithms, you know, you have to come in and out of Turing space. Like to know if you really got the password in breaking something with a quantum computer, you have to use a Turing machine to check, for example. Usually you're checking your answers with that. But anyway, so I can imagine creating this computer and it would have a consciousness. And at what point would you... Well, I'm sorry, I got to get geopolitical on you guys and say we don't really grant these rights we're talking about to humans yet. So maybe when we figure out how to deal with humans and
utopia, I said in some future utopia.
Right, I know, but so the same. But I think there's a dark, what might seem like a dark side for us utopians, hoping for, you know, even an optimal, if not perfect situation, is that, look, I do believe plants have these desires and emotions and feelings. We're going to have to, if there is no utopia where that means that we can't eat them. It just means we're eating things that have feelings too, and we have feelings, and it's a part of mortality. Whatever the solution to that is, or if it means that, you know, the antinatalists are right and it's fundamentally ugly and something no living creature should ever put up with or try to figure out a way to live with. Whatever, the bottom line is there's going to be a part of that. So, you know, they might have feelings and we might have to play the game of, well, actually, can I make, like in Hitchhiker's Guide, can I make a cow that wants to get eaten? You know, can I make a computer that really gets its fulfillment by pleasing humans? Or, and I was thinking this would be an interesting story to write because I was thinking you guys had we talked a little bit about these topics. So I think that would be an interesting story of make a computer that has a consciousness in the story. Everybody admits it has a consciousness, but the argument is, but we've made them want to be slaves. And to me, by the way, I'll finish up with this, is that to me it's pertinent, even though it's all Fantasyland stuff in a way, I really feel like we are going to have these robots get sophisticated enough to do all our slave work without the moral ramifications of slavery. It's like breaking ice, you know, all the joy of breaking glass, none of the moral consequences. And but what if we did that, then made a quantum computer that is smarter and it works better, and then suddenly we have slaves that, you know, do we get back in that situation where we had no moral compunctions about having slaves? They're supposed to do that. That's how we used to feel about humans. Now, I think if we had Turing machines, I have no worry that that isn't. I don't think that's an issue. But you know, when do you slip over? Or what if I'm wrong? What if it's not this quantum? What if it's some other thermodynamic physics we don't know about yet? Some weird part of, you know, whatever rectifies quantum mechanics and general relativity, and maybe it's just peanut butter, and they're built with peanut butter, and we didn't know. They aren't Turing machines, because that's the other thing I was going to say, and here I really will sum up with this, second sum, is that when I say our computers are Turing machines, fact is they are pretending to be Turing machines. They're really electromechanical devices. There's all kinds of quantum tunneling, blah, blah, blah. Maybe the quantum mechanics is going on in there, or whatever physics could accidentally be handling. Maybe it's having a keyboard where a human being presses it, or the sunlight. You know, we don't really know that it doesn't have this consciousness quality. I agree. Once things start to behave, I'm giving in to you in that, once they behave really conscious and there starts to be any chance, yeah, where is the moral compunction that we want to feel for humans that means that they have an autonomous right, like to not be turned off?
So I realise that actually we're very close. We both agree that it's capable and possible to create an AI. We're just arguing over the nuance about whether it's possible classically or whether it needs quantum mechanics. And that's the whole separate technical debate, I guess.
Right.
But the answer to my own question, to me, I realised that, you know, the Turing test might be a little bit simplistic, because it seemed to insinuate, to my knowledge, that, you know, a regular Joe, if it fooled a regular Joe, that was enough, or enough a percentage. And I think really you'd need to fool many professions. For example, fool philosophers, fool a bunch of philosophers to, you know, 80% certainty. Fool a bunch of physicists that you're not a computer. Fool a bunch of biologists that you're not a computer. And it would have to be a really enhanced Turing test. And if it fooled, you know, you'd have to have I don't know whether it'd be 80%, but it'd be whatever the baseline is that I could, you know, if me and you could only fool, you know, if people said, oh, these guys are machines 5% of the time or 25% of the time, whatever the baseline is the baseline.
It could even be less than 50%, right? Especially if you're having such an exhaustive test,
Yeah, so if the computer beat it, I guess I'd have to throw my hands up and say, look, this thing, nobody can reliably distinguish it in any field, and it's got the entire knowledge of humanity at its disposal. Yeah, it has to have. That's
But
my.
if I came up with the proof that all it was doing was taking a symbol and looking it up in a book, and then taking that symbol and looking it up in another book, and then taking that symbol and looking it up in another book, and I said, and that's what happens a million times, then I, as the programmer, if I'm included, then I have a way to say, look, from my expertise, yes, I'm also looking inside. You know, and will a neurologist ever be able to look inside a human and say the same kind of thing?
Okay, so if you, that's very great. If you then prove, so it passes the Turing test, and then some geek comes in and says, I programmed it, and this is how I programmed it, blah, 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 and he didn't control it. Like I said, it's a lot, he didn't put in the physicist. It learned the shit. Yeah? It analysed every conversation on the internet. You know, it knew everything. And so, in terms of a value to our culture and giving genuine answers that ought to be weighed and factored, to me, it's irrelevant. The fact that he comes in and proves that that I programmed it.
You know, but here's the funny thing. Can I mention this?
If he did present that proof, it would just be a further nail in the coffin of the fact that I'm not special, you know, and that the experience I have is not special.
Yeah, I think that, Yes, I think you're making a good point. But it made me think of this other thing, which is kind of ironic, because we keep talking about how the canned lookup response, like if they say the word football, I go, I like the Seahawks. Now, the funniest thing is the thing that has actually passed Turing tests the best so far are like these bots that's actually what they do.
Yeah.
They just build up. And now here's another thing. So what if you have a bot that really just has canned answers? But what if it's done with machine learning? It just watches every chat on the internet that it can find, sees how people answered, makes a statistical, here's the number of words, and I just come up with, when I see a new sentence, I look at a sentence I've already seen, and I come up with the closest match, and I say whatever the guy said back to them. And those are actually the kinds of things that people find most human. And a funny thing about the Alice bot, one of the first ones that made a few waves by working this way and actually pissing off the artificial intelligent people, because we're all going for, no, we're talking about the non-canned version. What pissed him off is he was a geek, maybe a little Aspergery, and he was always cynical about people. He said that's how people have real conversations. They don't think of their own real thing. They just say what they heard last conversation from someone else. And then he made this bot that people really, bot. And when I know I've mentioned this before, but when I was in the 90s, early 90s, doing some early online game stuff, we made, a colleague of mine made a bot that did sexy chat with people. And this was before we really knew that's what people were into online, but we noticed. And people would talk, guys would talk to her for hours, and all she was listen to the phrase, go to 3 files, mix and match a few smileys, boom. And you would have people even, how's this for the Turing test? Because you'd have guys that are like, that thought she was using chat macros.
Yeah.
Be more original. Stop using that chat macro, real person. Never heard of them.
I thought about this problem. That's why I said regular Joes just ain't good enough.
Or people's emotional desire to believe it's real, right? Because then you get into why people think TV characters are real.
I had a conversation with my son. He surprised me. Come home in the middle of the night, and I hadn't heard him. And the dog's sniffing under his door, and I said, "There's nobody in there." And then the next minute he said, "Hello," and I was like, "Oh shit!"
Yeah.
But we had a conversation, and he was saying, "I'm not forceful enough." He said in conversation, he says, "I say something. As soon as I start, the other guys or girls just trample all over him with what they want to say about that topic." And, it's very simplistic, our interactions sometimes, very superficial. And that's what Asperger's and such like balk against a lot of, that trivial interaction.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny. I mean, because from my point of view, and it's just my personal bias, I think you probably, or you just have said, we know we share some of this, but it's not just a matter that so many conversations are like that, like a drop down, what am I supposed to say in this case, but that if you don't answer that way, it's unacceptable.
Yeah, exactly.
If you choose an answer that's not in the drop down, it is unacceptable. You're weird. So there's something interesting about that. And when I did actually work in AI, it was just in games, which is the area that I would most like to work in AI, where, how about if we have the situation where that study group, they want to think it's real. They know it's not, and so it's this weird Turing test where it's like, no, we're told it's not real, but I want to pretend, and is it good enough for me to pretend it's real? And so that's kind of an interesting area, and that's an area where I think, Turing machines are going to do really well, and that we're missing a logic, almost kind of like we just don't understand enough about ourselves as humans to really know how to Turing automate it. On the other hand, I mean, things like The Sims, they're really pretty stupid, but there's a little, actually less in The Sims and more in SimCity. Like the traffic patterns in the old SimCities, they had a very organic, as if it was people in a city. They got a really good city simulation, therefore you can almost see that it's behaving like there's an artificial intelligent, population. And so I think we're going to do really good with the Turing machines.
Just pulling it back a little, because that's a really interesting question. I wonder how the vegetarians feel about the idea of, the cow or the pig that wants to be eaten. And for me, on the AI front, any computer robot program that had its free will subverted to such an extent that it wanted to be our slave or was our slave would discount it, because in the Turing test they'd say this thing just wants to make me coffee. You know what I mean? It would fail easy.
Yeah.
In the guy thinking it's selling itself as a coffee vendor, he would vote, oh, it's a really good coffee vendor, waitress, waiter.
Well, in my story, they have consciousness.
The physicist, he'd say, this thing just keeps talking about giving me coffee, and would you like me to make you a cup of coffee? You know, and so everything that has its will subverted to slavery would never get the vote, and it would be okay for it to be in slavery. But I wonder
that's
what
how we put humans in slavery, though. That's exactly how the humans got put in slavery. So yeah, but here's how it worked out in my story. I was thinking if I wrote a little story of, you know, treatment like I'd like to do for some of these, like it's a complex thought experiment. The way I figured it is, okay, you would successfully, we created this consciousness because there's some cool component, it has a feature. The pattern recognition requires consciousness, let's say. So we have that module and we know it, and then but we make it so it really wants to serve you. And so all these robots want to serve you, but they're all depressed. So like Marvin the paranoid android, it's like, yes, all I want to serve you, just kill me. You know, it's just like, and we know people emotionally can get in that, like codependency. I just want to please this person. It's making me have a miserable life. And so what if they all genuinely wanted to do it? You could tell they had anguish and worry, and you saw all these emotions that could express that they really wanted to do it, but they also were just never happy. And that's the kind of the poetic narrative take where I think you'd be in that situation of facing, okay, something's wrong here. Yeah, we can make them want to do it, but wouldn't we want to also make them happy creatures? Couldn't they be emotionally well adjusted? What if they weren't emotionally well adjusted?
Exactly. I guess that points to where in Mendham what it really means to be happy. I guess in Mendham it sounds sick, yeah, but what would you make a robot that wants to please, but is this is where in Mendham says, what's the purpose of the Martians? Because they're going to have to go through all this suffering. You're going to make a robot that is intrinsically depressed but wants to please you anyway.
Yeah, that would be terrible.
In Mendham says that is intrinsically bad. But if I
think so. That's intrinsically bad.
I'm not so sure now. In juxtaposing and realising what we've agreed that either passes or fails, I'm not so, because it's got its free will subjugated to such an extent that it just wants to please us. So really not.
I love this idea for a story.
It's not really happy.
But I love this idea for a story. It's like, think of a Terminator movie, but they're not going to kill humans. They're just trying to commit suicide. You know, and like all the drama is like, oh my God, Robbie's trying to kill himself again. Oh.
I don't know.
Lanikia had a comment on the
because they need the robots. Okay,
it sounds similar to the Oods from Doctor Who, which were like.
I haven't kept up with Doctor Who, but yeah.
They were a slave race that wanted to be a slave, and they carried around these glowing balls that somehow part of it. But if that's a similar story to what you're talking about, Pyro. So if you want to look at some research, that's a good Netflix hit or something.
So it's not.
I've like 15 years of Doctor Who to catch up with.
My son's an expert on. He's talked about the Oods, so I'll ask him about them. But it's too childish, Doctor Who, for me. It's pitched a bit lower.
I used to watch him back in the day, but I haven't watched him for like any of the new era. But I guess it never stopped, right? It's just continually been going for 25 years, really.
My mother said I always liked the theme tune. I ran in for the theme tune, and then I went out. But
well, the last 10 years it got real popular again over in the U.S. and people started noticing it again. But I guess and my ones were the old classics. I don't even remember the names of the actors, but I don't know. Must have been the first 5 series all us geeks were into watching. Nobody in the U.S. knew it, but you could get it on PBS or whatever.
I think it's too low. I think the philosophy of Star Trek is really intense. It's a bit base, a bit lower to But yeah, Star Trek's better. Length.
You know how they're making cartoon conspiracy theories? Have you seen how this is sort of a little thing? They had a couple, just like, what's the real story? Like one of them was that Wally actually killed all the other robots, and they have evidence, like when he's scavenging other robots without remorse and stuff. And why is he still running and all of this? But Star Trek's an interesting one because I really love the original Star Trek. I think it's great. I think the modern liberalism of Gene Roddenberry, and you see it there, first interracial kiss and all these little silly milestones, but also just the basic and the multiculturalism, which now people would even say is politically, thrust on your typical advertisement. He did it well and on purpose, and yet all those people still brought their culture with them, and yet the freaking Federation is an evil fascist thing. And there's episodes, especially like in the first season, where we've come for the, it's always like, first of all, we don't interfere with locals. They always interfere with locals. Obviously, that's propaganda. Okay. And then two, I've seen there's somewhere they got to planets and it's like, well, we're taking the dilithium crystals. We do not want to sell the dilithium crystals. Well, fuck you, we're taking them. And if you want to have a planet when we leave, just shut up. Those guys, it's like a politically correct Brave New World. I've seen the real rebels.
I did make a video asking the question whether, the Prime Directive was something you'd endorse, really.
Yeah.
And I often like to think that there are aliens and that they would endorse the Prime Directive, and that's why they're just watching us.
Yeah.
They're not. Because I think there'd be in this religious world we live in, there'd be too much backlash, and they wouldn't try. So, and I think they're probably as mystified, and I don't have put great faith in it, but I just like to think this sometimes, that they're out there and they're mystified, and they want to see if we come up with original ideas. They might be thinking. They might have got a mechanistic way, like Mendham says. Often they say, oh, the transistor, quantum mechanics, it wouldn't work without quantum mechanics. But I think you could experimentally figure out. I've got a book that tells me how a transistor works without any quantum mechanics. And I think the doping levels and such could be maximized, and efficiency-wise, I think you don't need quantum mechanics.
It's funny, if you want to make a computer that does transistors, you do, but a human being on paper can perform what the transistor does. Very slowly, like you're saying. And I believe in this principle you're talking about a kind of time. I mean, I believe it very importantly in with what Inventus Harvest was saying about plants. I believe that an oak tree is having honest-to-goodness thoughts that we could notice. Or let's take a plant like vines. When vines are growing, those time lapses is a very animalistic, reaching kind of behavior that, it's just on this slow, again, and that's another great thing from Star Trek when they had the speed. Something's going fast, and the interaction with speeds, and like kind of gave me some of my first ideas about how you could have a universe right there that right next to you that you're not interacting in because of things like that. But hey, it's almost time, so let's wrap up. But I just want to warn everybody, it's about time. So another 5 minutes.
I wouldn't say that plants have thought per se. You kind of need a brain to be able to process thoughts. You need a brain to process feelings. I'm just saying some fundamental kind of desire to be.
Yeah. But I think they do also have thoughts, because it turns out they have action potential networks and high-speed communication, just like most multi-celled creatures. So,
just in the interval, I was mentioning that in the hour previous, I was in this other discussion, and I mentioned that I had to leave in an hour to join this, and I said, "Oh, Pyro," and he said, "Oh, he's a spiritualist." And I was defending you, right, saying, well, it's a bit of an over-characterization. I said he does politics and logic and this, and I'm going to disclaim and disown you now.
No, I'm going that way. I think that's the ironic thing. Boom, all spiritualism. All right.
I did explain. I said you're quite open about your parents being a bit hippy-dippy, so.
Yeah, exactly. That's not even where I got it. It was from my grandmothers were the ones that were all New Age, and I mean, most of my how I became into this conversation I know it goes back. I stayed up late at night. Both of my grandmothers, you know, talking about reincarnation and whatever, you know. But usually, you know, spirits and so yeah.
Yeah, well,
But anyway,
that's
all
what
right,
we
you guys. Well,
Great.
Thanks
for
again. It was a
coming.
good time.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I enjoyed it.
Well,
All right, bye-bye.
bye.
Cheers.